Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole crew styling when we step out of the car. Bouncers lift the rope and the crowd goes off. 20 shots to the table, we don't even hit the bar.
Welcome back to our readers and listeners to this collaboration called What's New between the Florida International University, Ratcliffe Art and Design Incubator, and Inspicio Arts. I want to welcome in Ray Elman. Another week, Ray, how are you doing?
Another week, and I'm still feeling okay. And even being a daredevil, because we went to first an opening at the Coral Gables Museum, and then we went to the opening night at the New World Symphony on Saturday night, and I still feel fine.
Okay, good. And let's keep it that way, right?
Yeah.
So let's kick it off. This is the last week that we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. It started back in September, and we want to talk about Michel Hausmann, originally from Venezuela, artistic director for Miami New Drama at the Colony Theater. So let's kick it off, Ray. Tell me a little bit about what's been happening with theater with the pandemic, and now, it's kind of gearing to start back up.
Well, that's an interesting question to ask, because everything's kind of been shut down during the pandemic. In fact, there's a play that will sort of reopen, but really have its world premiere on December 4th at the Colony Theater, the play is called A Wonderful World, and it's the life of Louis Armstrong as told through the eyes of his 4 wives. And the play was written by a native Miamian, Orrin Squire. And we happened to see the last preview before the play was supposed to open back in March of 2020. And the next day they shut it down because of the pandemic. So it has yet to open. And it's a magnificent play. It's a musical. And you learn a lot about Louis Armstrong, and seeing his life through the eyes of his 4 wives is really, who are all very talented, is a unique way to see it. So that's an example of the kind of adventurous and creative programming and productions that are at Miami New Drama. And one of the things that happened during the course of the pandemic, when people didn't want to go inside theaters, obviously the pandemic's still going on, but when people were terrified of going inside a theater, is they had a play they called that was called The 7 Deadly Sins. And the way they produced and presented it was in storefront windows on Lincoln Road. So the audience sat in chairs outside, and the actors were inside performing in shop windows, in essence. And so that was another example of the brilliant programming. And when I say brilliant programming, it's really the genius of Michel Hausmann, who has brought a really unique perspective to theater in the Miami and South Florida area. And I would call him the preeminent theater person right now in our area.
So taking his experience and, things that have happened in Venezuela over the past decades and years, we've all seen it play out, protests, Chavez, Maduro, interim president Guaido. How much of the experience that he brings to these productions come as inspiration and experience from what he went through in Venezuela, and how theater basically became like a place where, it also got shut down. They didn't want, actors and people attending these kinds of big events. So talk a little bit about that.
So it's interesting, as in my interview, I asked Michel if he had started off in a theater program in college, and he said no. when he was in high school, he decided that movies were a higher art form. So he actually enrolled in film school, and part of his film experience was being in Czechoslovakia in a film program in Prague. And he came back to Venezuela to create films, and also to pay the bills to do some advertising, some commercials. And he hated it all. And what he said to me was he felt like compared to live theater, films were dead. That live theater was so much more vibrant than films. And so a friend of his said, well, why don't you direct a film? And he said, what do you think, I can just go out there and direct a film? And he says, turns out you can do that. So I mean, not direct a film, direct a play. And so he started directing plays and got very involved in big productions and bringing things to Venezuela, like Jesus Christ Superstar and Fiddler on the Roof, and big theater productions like that. And at a moment in time, and I think it was around 2010, 2011, when when there was a conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, and Chavez kicked out the Israeli ambassador. And there were protests, and the next thing he knows, there was pressure being put on his theater group and his productions. They weren't allowed to advertise in the major media channels in Venezuela. And actually, they were doing a production of Jesus Christ Superstar, but a lot of the people that were participating in Michel's productions were from the Jewish community. And all of a sudden, about 2 weeks into the run of the play, somebody threw tear gas into the behind stage, and people were lying on the floor, and there was all kinds of bad stuff happening. And they had a large crowd, like maybe 3,000 people in the theater, and they had fire marshals there, and the fire marshals say, don't yell fire in a theater, the old saw, there'll be a catastrophe. See if you can keep the show running. And so they managed to seal off the tear gas, and kept the performance going, but some of the tear gas was seeping down into the orchestra pit, and they started the performance with 40 people in the orchestra, and one by one the musicians had to leave because of the tear gas. They ended the performance with 6 musicians, but they got through it. They were celebratory of it, but Michel realized that the writing was on the wall and he had to get out of it. So he moved to New York, where he got involved in theater, and he was there for about 5 years. And he realized that Miami would be a great place to do theater because the opportunity for expanding the theater community was wide open. And also because he was committed to doing socially meaningful plays that would resonate with the diverse communities of Miami. And one of the interesting things he said to me was that traditionally in theater, there's the normal audience, the traditional audience is a white, more affluent audience. But that's a relatively narrow niche, especially in a place like Miami, which isn't a majority English-speaking language community. So he was committed to putting on plays that spoke to all the diverse communities. And so, for example, a play he put on a few years ago was One Night in Miami, which became the movie One Night in Miami. And it's about the night that Cassius Clay won the heavyweight championship in Miami and celebrated at the Hampton House Motel in Brownsville. And they drew a 40% Black audience, African-American audience to that production, as well as to A Wonderful World. And he's also put on plays that are entirely in Spanish and works with Spanish language screenwriters or playwrights. And so I think the Miami New Drama is a unique organization that is doing something wonderful for Miami and for our nation.
So just for everyone that's interested, the play that is running right now through October 17th is a special day and it's free to the public, correct?
Correct. And it's called, as you said, My Special Day. And it's about the rise of fascism. So it's very timely because it's about the kind of creeping nature of fascism that if we don't watch out, that's going to happen in our country.
And then the next one is Wonderful World, right? And
Correct.
that runs December 4th through January 16th. And I'm assuming that there would be a price attached to it, right? There's different
Yes.
subscription levels and
Yeah,
people
that's
can go to the
definitely not
website.
going, that's not going to be free to the public, but that's something that people should save up for and attend because, as I said, we saw the last preview of it and it's magnificent. And it's definitely going to make its way to Broadway. And so now's the great time to see it when it's in its world premiere performance. And it's written by a native Miamian.
So once again, it's this is on Michel Hausmann, artistic director for Miami New Drama at the Colony Theater. The one running right now is a special day. It ends October 17th, free to the public. And the next one coming up is Wonderful World, starts December 4th. Anything else you want to add, Ray?
Well, in our interview, we literally interviewed Michelle yesterday for Inspicio Arts, and we will publish the interview this week.
Okay, so everyone stay tuned to our listeners and our readers of Inspicio Arts. Thank you so much, Ray.
I should add, Michelle tells the story of his life much better than I do. So it's really worthwhile.
It's always better in first person, I think, right? Coming from the source.
That's right.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay, great to see you, Maggie. Bye-bye.
Likewise, thank you. Have a great week.